For centuries, the Roman Empire stood as the greatest political and military power the world had ever known. Its laws shaped civilizations, its roads connected continents, and its armies enforced order, from the deserts of Africa to the forests of northern Europe. To many Romans, the empire seemed eternal. Yet in the year 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire quietly came to an end, not with a single catastrophic battle, but through decades of decay, betrayal, and irreversible decline. The fall of the Western Roman Empire was not a sudden collapse. It was the final act of a long tragedy that unfolded over generations. By the 5th century AD, Rome had already lost much of what once made it invincible. The empire had grown too large to govern effectively. Political authority was fragmented, and emperors were often little more than puppets controlled by generals, court officials, or barbarian warlords. The Western Empire, in particular, was far weaker than its eastern counterpart, which would later survive as the Byzantine Empire for nearly 1,000 more years. One of Rome's greatest problems was leadership instability. Between the 3rd and 5th centuries, emperors rose and fell with alarming speed. Many ruled for only months or years before being assassinated, overthrown, or replaced. This constant turmoil destroyed continuity and long-term planning. Laws changed unpredictably, loyalty shifted rapidly, and the army increasingly dictated politics rather than served it. The Roman military itself had changed dramatically. Once composed of disciplined citizen soldiers, it now relied heavily on mercenaries and barbarian recruits. Goths, Vandals, Franks, and other Germanic peoples filled the ranks of Roman armies. While many served loyally, their allegiance was often to their commanders rather than to Rome itself. The idea of Roman identity was fading. Economic collapse further weakened the empire. Heavy taxation crushed farmers and merchants. Inflation devalued currency. Trade routes declined as insecurity spread. Cities shrank, infrastructure decayed, and wealth became concentrated in the hands of elites who often avoided taxes through political influence. The state struggled to pay its soldiers, leading to desertion and unrest. At the same time, Rome faced relentless external pressure. Germanic tribes pushed against the empire's borders, driven by population growth, climate pressures, and the westward expansion of the Huns. These migrations were not simply invasions. They were mass movements of entire peoples, seeking land and survival. Rome, unable to manage or integrate them effectively, oscillated between violent repression and desperate accommodation. The sack of Rome in 410 AD by the Visigoths shattered the myth of Roman invincibility, but the empire continued to exist in name. Emperors still ruled, laws were still issued, and armies still marched. Yet real power increasingly slipped away from imperial hands. One of the most devastating blows came in 439 AD when the Vandals captured Carthage, Rome's most important source of grain. With North Africa lost, the Western Empire's economy was crippled. Rome could no longer feed its cities or fund its armies effectively. The loss of Africa marked a turning point from which recovery was impossible. As Roman authority collapsed, barbarian kingdoms rose within imperial territory. Visigoths ruled much of Spain and southern Gaul. Vandals dominated North Africa. Burgundians and Franks established themselves in Gaul. These rulers often claimed to govern in Rome's name, but in reality, imperial power had become symbolic. The Western emperors themselves grew increasingly insignificant. By the mid-5th century, real power lay with military strongmen known as magister militum. These generals controlled the army and manipulated imperial succession. Emperors were chosen not for competence, but for obedience. One of the last capable Roman generals was Odoacer, sometimes called the last of the Romans. He skillfully balanced alliances with barbarian forces and successfully halted Attila the Hun at the Battle of the Catalonian Plains in 451 AD, yet even Oedeus fell victim to court intrigue. In 454 AD, he was murdered by Emperor Valentinian III, who feared his influence. With Oedeus dead, the Western Empire lost its final pillar of stability. The years that followed were marked by chaos. Valentinian III himself was assassinated. A succession of weak emperors followed, each ruling briefly before being deposed or killed. Rome was no longer governed, it merely drifted. By this point, the empire's army was dominated by barbarian federates, particularly Germanic troops under their own leaders. Among them was a man named Odoacer. Odoacer was a Germanic soldier who served in the Roman army. By 476 AD, he commanded a powerful force in Italy composed largely of barbarian troops who had grown tired of unpaid service and empty promises. When they demanded land in Italy and were refused, Odoacer revolted. The reigning emperor at the time was Romulus Augustulus, a teenage boy installed on the throne by his father, the general Orestes. Romulus had no real authority, no army of his own, and no political power. He was emperor in name only. Odoacer marched on Ravenna, defeated Orestes, and deposed Romulus Augustulus without significant resistance. Rather than declaring himself emperor, Odoacer did something unprecedented. He sent the imperial insignia, the symbols of Western imperial authority, to the Eastern Roman emperor in Constantinople. In doing so, he declared that the West no longer needed its own emperor. In 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire officially ceased to exist. There was no great battle, no dramatic final stand. The empire simply ended. Rome did not vanish overnight. Cities continued to exist. Roman law influenced barbarian kingdoms. The Church preserved Roman culture and language. Life went on, but the centralized imperial system that had ruled Western Europe for centuries was gone forever. The fall of the Western Roman Empire reshaped history. Without imperial authority, Europe fragmented into smaller kingdoms. Roads fell into disrepair. Trade declined further. Literacy became rare outside the church. Political power became localized and personal rather than institutional. The ancient world gave way to the medieval. Yet Rome's legacy endured. Roman law influenced modern legal systems. Latin evolved into Romance languages. Roman engineering shaped infrastructure for centuries. Christianity, once persecuted, became the dominant faith of Europe through Roman adoption and spread. The fall of the Western Roman Empire was not the end of civilization, it was a transformation. Rome did not fall in a single day. It collapsed under the weight of its own contradictions: expansion without integration, power without accountability, wealth without sustainability, and leadership without vision. In 476 AD, when Romulus Augustulus was quietly removed from the throne, few people could have imagined how deeply that moment would echo through history. Yet it marked the end of one of humanity's greatest empires and the beginning of a new world. The Western Roman Empire did not fall because it was conquered. It fell because it could no longer hold itself together.